Good morning. Thank you for that children's story. I wonder what Richard Dawkins would say about that. Honestly. I had the children's story many years ago when we actually had children here at the time. And I introduced it by asking them if they had ever done anything really stupid. And then I said, I did once. And a voice from the congregation said, only once? The question was not impertinent. It seems that every time I do something stupid, something bad happens. The 29th of January this year was no exception. It was a hot day. My dear wife was feeling a little bit tired and she asked for my help to water the garden. She said, you do the front and I'll do the back. I was glad to assist. So I went, grabbed the hose, pulled out the reel, and first item was the planter bowl up on the front porch. So I went up 2 steps with the hose and realised that it really wasn't quite high enough, so I took a 3rd step. And when I'd given it a good douse of water, I took 2 steps back and thought I was on ground level. Naturally, my 3rd step landed on 8 inches of fresh air. The result turned out to be a fractured 5th lumbar vertebrae. Hence my absence from church until last week. But enough of my stupidity. Let's come to the matter in hand. The place, North Africa. Time, July 1941. In just 10 days, Rommel's Afrika Korps had pushed the British Army back to the Egyptian border. General Wavell's counter-attack had failed and he had been replaced by General Auchinleck. Place, Cairo. Middle East headquarters of the British Army. A car draws up at the main gate of the compound. A young lieutenant of the 8th Commando alights, adjusts his crutches and swings up to the gate. You're past, Lieutenant. Oh yes, of course. A moment of searching of pockets. I'm sorry, Sergeant. I must have left it behind. I have an important appointment and I'm late. You couldn't overlook it just this once, could you? No pass, no go. Move aside, Lieutenant. Oh, the power of a sergeant when a lieutenant makes a blue. He moved away a few yards and looked at the barbed wire fence. There was a narrow gap between the strainer post and the guardhouse. The sentries were occupied with another carload of officers. Disregarding his crutches, he slid through the gap and hurried as fast as he could towards the entrance. Then, "Stop that man!" But the lieutenant disappeared through the front door. Now, in fact, he did not have an appointment with anybody. He had intended to try and see the Commander-in-Chief. But with the hubbub behind him, he had to act fast. He came to a door marked Adjutant General and decided this would have to do. He entered. The Major, seated at the desk, looked up in surprise. "What the devil do you mean, bursting in here like this?" The Lieutenant saluted smartly. "I'm sorry, sir, but I had to see you on urgent business." "Are you sure you can spare the time to explain?" The Lieutenant introduced himself as David Sterling, Scots Guards, No. 8 Commando with Lay Force, now being disbanded. He explained that he had a plan for a small force of men to be trained to parachute behind the enemy lines and destroy the whole German Air Force on the ground. Wow. "Do you remember me, Sterling?" "No, sir." "And do you know why you don't remember me? And why, on the other hand, I remember you only too clearly?" "No, sir." "Because in 1939 I gave a lecture to the 2nd Battalion of the Scots Guards on tactics. When I came to question you, Sterling, I found you in a deep sleep." The answer is no, Lieutenant Sterling, a flat, unqualified no. Good day. You can use your imagination to fill in those two gaps. Sterling saluted and rapidly retreated. Turning a corner of the corridor, he saw the sentry at the other end, so hastily knocking on another door, he entered, finding himself facing General Ritchie, Deputy Chief of Staff, Middle East Forces, who looked up with the same surprise as the Major. But when Sterling stated his purpose, Ritchie paused for a moment, then invited him to be seated. Sterling handed the General a written memorandum which he read for the next 10 minutes. Then he looked up and said, "I think this may be the sort of plan we are looking for. I will discuss it with the Commander-in-Chief and let you know in the next day or so." And so, the SAS was born. Recruitment and rigorous training began. Try jumping off the back of a truck at 30 miles an hour to simulate your parachute landing. Just one example. At first, there was considerable amount of scepticism to Sterling's ideas. One day he was visited by a Royal Air Force group captain from GHQ who expressed the view that Sterling's men would find it very difficult to get onto the enemy airfields in the first place. David responded in typical military fashion, "Perhaps you would like to put some money on it?" £10 says we can get onto Heliopolis Airport any time we like. But don't worry, we will only put labels on the aircraft. "You're on," snapped the group captain. "What's more," added David, "you can tell them we're coming. Expect us about the end of October." 40 men were chosen for the raid. They had to hike 90 miles across the desert, from Kabrit to Heliopolis, which they did over 3 nights of 30 miles each, laying up during the day and carrying their food and water for the 4 days of the operation. About midnight on the 4th night, Paddy Main's squad approached the airfield undetected. Wire cutters made short work of the perimeter fence and they quietly labelled 40 aircraft. Fu was quite a famous character during the Second World War. Before they retired and headed for the barracks at Abbasia, the other 3 squads were equally successful. The group captain duly sent his cheque for £10 to cover his wager, and heated reprimands disturbed the serenity of the air branch of GHQ for some time. The North African campaign was ideal for the experiment, of course. The battle zone was confined to a comparatively narrow strip of land, bounded by the Mediterranean Sea to the north and the desert to the south. Early attempts were not successful for a number of reasons. But when Sterling was able to get his hands on American jeeps, his force came into its own. Having acquired the services of a master navigator in the person of the Rhodesian, Mike Sadler, they were able to navigate the desert like the ocean and could make their way to within reach of the target deep behind the enemy lines. Then, under the cover of darkness, quietly walk onto an airfield, place their sticky bombs on each of the aircraft. Fuses were set for 30 minutes, by which time they would have melted away back into the desert, where they could enjoy the fireworks show. With successful raids under their belts, more equipment became available, and Sterling was able to develop new techniques. An example is the raid on Sidi Hanish Aerodrome, known as Landing Ground 12. This was a major supply depot for Rommel's front line. His Africa Corps was facing the British 8th Army on a 29-mile front between El Alamein on the coast and the Quatara Depression. By sticking to the rim of the depression, the SAS was able to slip past the front line and establish a base for operations deep in the desert. On the 25th of July 1942, Sterling arrived at his new base with 20 brand new jeeps, each mounting 2 pairs of Vickers K machine guns, and these are a pretty potent weapon. The next night, Sadler led them to the aerodrome. They attacked in line abreast formation, but giving the impression of a large attacking force. Then, at Sterling's signal, they formed into 2 lines behind Sterling's jeep and roared onto the runway, firing into the aircraft neatly lined up on each side. At the end of the runway, they pulled up. Sterling calmly assessed the situation. You've used a lot more ammunition than you needed to, fellas. And then they returned down the runway, cleaning up what was left, and departed into the desert. 12 months later, at a meeting of the top brass in Cairo, an army brigadier suggested to an Air Force Air Vice Marshal that Sterling should be awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. The Air Vice Marshal recovered his phlegm and spluttered, "What on earth for? The fellow's not in the Air Force." Well, he's destroyed more than 250 enemy aircraft, which is more than any of your squadrons have done. You can read the full story in The Phantom Major by Virginia Cowles. It's a fascinating read. As I read her account, I was reminded of another soldier who performed remarkably well with a very small squad of men. We find the story in Judges chapter 6. The Israelites had once again forgotten on which side their bread was buttered. Verse 1. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. When they cried unto the Lord, he sent them a prophet who upbraided them for not listening to the Lord, but apparently gave them no reassurance whatever. But in verse 11, the angel of the Lord comes and sits down under the oak tree in Ophrah, belonging to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon is threshing wheat in the winepress. Threshing wheat in a winepress? How strange. He was hoping to hide his efforts from the Midianites. The angel speaks. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. The implication is clear, but Gideon's not having any. But sir, he responds, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our fathers told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and put us into the hands of Midian. The Lord responds, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? And the narrative suggests that it wasn't just an angel who was speaking, but the Lord himself. Gideon is staggered by the call. Like Moses before him, he protests, but Lord, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. The Lord responds, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites together. Fantastic. But Gideon still has his doubts. Is he dreaming? Is this a hallucination brought on by wishful thinking? He remembers Abraham, who entertained angels with a meal. Please wait while I bring you my offering. And the Lord responds, I will wait. Ah, the patience of God. Gideon goes and kills a goat, dresses it, cooks it, and bakes bread. Then brings the meal back to the angel, who tells him to lay it on the rock under the oak tree. The angel touches the meal with the staff in his hand. Fire rises from the rock and consumes it, and the angel disappears. Now Gideon is scared stiff. Ah, sovereign Lord, he says, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. And back comes the reassuring message. Peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die. That night, Gideon receives his first assignment. His father, Joash, had built an altar to Baal, where the locals worshipped. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar on this rock and sacrifice the second bull from your father's herd. Now that's a hard call if ever there was one. The reaction of the townsfolk was entirely predictable. And what would Dad say about the bullock? But Gideon took 10 servants and did the job that night. Next morning, the townsfolk fulfilled the prediction. String him up, they screamed. But Joash comes through with calm logic. If Baal is really a god, he can defend himself when somebody breaks down his altar. Fair comment. However, the Midianites saw this as incipient rebellion and decided to nip it in the bud, and to do the job properly, they enlisted the aid of the Amalekites and other eastern peoples, which wasn't a very bright move as it turned out. Their combined army crossed the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. Gideon responds by calling the Israelites to arms, specifically his own tribe, Manasseh, plus Zebulun, Asher and Naphtali. Interestingly, the tribe of Issachar is not mentioned. I wondered about that, but then I thought, they were in it regardless because the valley of Jezreel is in Issachar territory. 32,000 men respond. Now Gideon is feeling the pressure, and he asks God for a sign that he is really with him. He puts out a fleece overnight and says, "If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said." In the morning, the fleece is saturated and the ground is dry. But hang on, Lord, I got that one back to front. The fleece could hold the water while the ground was drying. Can we do it the other way round, please? And an ever-patient Lord accedes to his request. Next morning, the fleece is dry on the wet ground. Early next morning, Gideon and his men camp at the spring of Harod, which is still there today. And now God tells Gideon, "You have too many men. In accordance with the law I gave to Moses," recorded in Deuteronomy 25-8, "any man with valid reason, or even if he is afraid, can go home." 22,000 left. Shock, horror. But the Lord is not finished yet. There are still too many men. What? Take them down to the water. If they kneel to drink, send them to their tents. Not home, notice. If they scoop the water with their hands to their mouth, I can use them. And Gideon is left with 300 men. Did we mention the patience of God? The Lord knew what a shattering effect this would have had on Gideon, and he immediately reassures him. "With the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands." Then he sends him on a reconnaissance mission into the enemy camp with his faithful servant by his side. I can imagine Gideon thinking, if I come back from this one, it will be a miracle. But think about that. With all the mixture of nations in that camp, who's going to notice Gideon and his mate? They enter the camp and hear two men talking. One has had a dream in which a round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. His companion responds, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. Now I ask you, if this man was thinking thus, how many others were thinking along exactly the same lines? How many others had dreamed of a barley bread loaf tumbling into the camp? Gideon slips away into the darkness and hurries back to wake his sleeping 300. He divides them into 3 groups, providing each man with a trumpet and an empty jar with a torch hidden inside it. Think about that. That had to be prepared for, didn't it? Okay, men, this is it. 0 hour is the beginning of the middle watch. Before that, we have to surround the camp with no noise, leaving a gap on the southwest side. As they are changing the guard, I will blow my trumpet and smash the pitcher, revealing the torch. Immediately you all do the same, and we all shout, "The side of the Lord and of Gideon!" Can you imagine the effect on the sleeping army? They are awakened by the crash of 300 smashing clay pitchers and 300 lusty voices shouting, and surrounded by 300 flaring torches. How many men are behind each torch? They cannot know. They panic. They run. In the darkness, every shadowy figure becomes an enemy to be killed to enable their escape. They have to get away through that gap to the southwest in the ring of fire. Now, a small but quite significant detail. What is wrong with this picture? It portrays some of Gideon's men as a single group. The Midianite army totaled 135,000 men. To surround such an army, even on just 3 sides, every one of those 300 men would have had to have been alone. Only the bravest and most disciplined men could cope with an order of such magnitude. We may well say these were Gideon's SAS. Now Gideon sends the recall order to the rest of his army. Ephraim is called in to assist, and together they chase the enemy out of the country. The mopping up operation continues as described in chapter 8. But the men of Ephraim are not happy. "Why didn't you call us in the beginning?" they complain. And Gideon tactfully defuses the situation by giving them full credit for the capture and execution of the 2 Midianite kings, Oreb and Zeb. It would be nice to be able to leave the story at this point, with Gideon riding high on the wave of his popularity. But there's another important message for us here. When it was all over, the Israelites came to Gideon and said, "Rule over us, you, your son and your grandson, because you have saved us out of the hand of Midian." But Gideon told them, "I will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." "Well said, sir." But then he made a request. "Each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder." They answered, "We will be glad to give it to you." The weight of the gold was 1,700 shekels, about 19 kilograms. What did he have in mind? We don't know. But we do know what he did with it. Well, we think we do. He made an ephod of it, which he placed in his city Ophrah. An ephod? What is an ephod? Primarily, it was the outer garment worn by the high priest. Exodus and Josephus both describe at some length the beauty of the garments prepared for the high priest. Josephus tells us that the standard dress for all priests was an undergarment of breeches and a linen vestment with girdle. To this, the high priest added a blue robe, and over this, the ephod woven from gold, blue, purple, and scarlet. The breastplate was attached to the ephod. But times change. As the child Samuel ministered in the temple, he was girded with a linen ephod. The 85 priests slain by Doeg the Edomite in obedience to Saul's crazy order were wearers of the linen ephod. And when David danced before the Lord as the ark was brought back to Jerusalem, he was wearing a linen ephod. But now, come back to 1 Samuel 30, verse 7. David is distressed. The Amalekites have destroyed his city of Ziklag and carried away the women, including his wives. He goes to Abiathar the priest and requests the ephod to determine God's will for him. This can only be the breastplate containing the Urim and the Thummim used for determining the will of God. So we now have 3 different usages of the word. Which usage applies to the ephod set up by Gideon in his hometown of Ophrah? Some have suggested that whatever its physical form, it was in competition with the ephod of the high priest at Shiloh, which was in the territory of Ephraim. This is a plausible concept. But what does the word actually say? Judges 8:27. Gideon made the gold into an ephod which he placed in Ophrah, his town. Could I suggest that perhaps this was intended simply as a memorial to his victory? No different to the many memorials, large and small, scattered around this country. But what happened next? All Israel prostituted themselves by worshipping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. The memorial became an ephod. Idolatry is such an insidious influence in our lives. It can start as simple admiration for a voice, an act of heroism, sporting prowess, even loyalty to a cause, but end up destroying our ability to see things as they really are. It can also destroy the object of that worship. How many pop stars and other heroes have been ruined by the adulation showered upon them? Indeed, how many Christian leaders and others have fallen from grace in similar fashion? Paul's admonition in 1 Corinthians 10:12 is still good. So let the man who feels sure of his standing today be careful that he does not fall tomorrow. That's Philip's translation. So this Anzac Day, as we remember those who fought, suffered and died in defence of the freedoms we all hold dear, let us remember we are all combatants in the struggle against the enemy. On the 18th of June 1940, Churchill addressed the House of Commons. The Battle of France is over. I expect the Battle of Britain is about to begin. He concluded his speech with these words: let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour. His challenge is just as appropriate for us today.